I was born Hanna Eva in 1937 in February in Vienna, Austria. My father was basically a white-collar worker, worked for the Holland America line. And my father, who was also very artistic, from the time he was very young, collected stamps. Well, anyone who collects stamps know that you end up with a lot of garbage as well as the good stuff. And what he did with all those garbagey stamps is he made wonderful pictures out of them. My mother was a dentist in Vienna. I have something that she crocheted. My mother was crocheting a blanket, and she was very, very sick at that time. And I think she just was determined to finish it, because she died right after it was finished. I still have it. Well, my mother and I, of course, were the ones that had to get out. My father was in the concentration camp. Of course, when we left, you could take virtually nothing with you. Basically what you could put in a suitcase. So what she did is she converted her assets, whatever she could, into gold. She melted the gold down. Being a dentist, she could do that. And on all my clothes, or on as many clothes as she could, she made buttons out of gold. And she covered the buttons with material from the clothes. So it just looked like I was wearing whatever, a jacket with buttons. And that's how she got the gold out of the country. Of course, it was taking an enormous risk, because had that been discovered, that would have been the end of us. But luckily it wasn't. My mother and I arrived in December 38. And my father came, I don't know what month, but he came in 1940.
My first reaction was one of just unbelievable shock. I've known that that video has existed for 30 years, but I never knew how to find it. I never knew where it was in the archives, or where it was in the universe, frankly. And it wasn't until Miles found it that I realized how long I've been longing to see it.
Our so-called uniform were almost like paper. I mean thin. We were freezing. The only thing to keep us warm was a paper bag, which we put under the shirt. And that was very strongly forbidden. I would have been severely punished if they would have found out. But we took a chance. We couldn't do otherwise. Myself, I had some frostbites in the ears in the winter time, but it wasn't too bad.
I was saddened because of the experience of what he had gone through, deeply saddened by what I knew others had gone through, people who he knew and people who he didn't know who didn't make it out. And proud of him for what he had accomplished in this country and for his bravery in sitting in front of a camera and talking about things he probably wished he didn't recall.
When I first saw the tape of my father, when I first saw the picture, I got really choked up to see his face again, because he died 1987. Anyway, it's been a long time, so he was just as I remembered him. So it was very nice. You could hear it from the interview what a positive person he was, how the treatment that he took, that he accepted, the chances he took. I think he left out a lot.
And they asked me about all those things. Is it true? Is that true? Is that true? I told him yes. And they said, isn't that only propaganda? So I told him, listen, whatever you hear, in summa summarum, and you add to it 1000% or even more, you still don't have the whole story, what happens there, all over, in the cities, in the concentration camps.
To go to Vienna now is because there won't be much more time for us that we might be able to go. And now we want to go and I can examine my roots. It all is because of Debbie. It's because of what happened to Debbie when she went to Vienna for a meeting, a convention. She had some extra time, so she started digging into my past.
I was able to go into the archives, find the address of the apartment building where my mother was born, where my grandparents lived, go to the train station where my mother and my grandmother waited to be transported out of Nazi-occupied Vienna. It was incredibly intense for me, that trip.
So that's what made us think, this is something we want everybody in the family to see as well. For me to find out and to share it with everybody in the family.
So this is a chance to go back to Vienna and take everybody with us to, first of all, experience Vienna, which is an absolutely wonderful city, but also to experience the dark side. So it's a roots tour with a mission, namely to explore the historical context of her family and their experiences.
I hope to learn more about where we came from and the reasons why we left and what we also left behind. Obviously, the family spread and we lost a lot of them, and I want to see where we were before the trauma of the Holocaust.
I hope to learn a lot more about our family history and just about European culture.
Everything. I'm just excited about that we actually get to be together as a family and do a trip.
Other than the food, the chance to hang out with the whole family and see a new place that has a connection for us, even if it's a less than wonderful connection, most of our memories. We
only see each other twice a year, Thanksgiving and Passover. So the fact that we all get to spend like quality time for a couple weeks with each other, at our best, at our worst, and just learn about Vienna and hear it from Grandma's perspective, because it's one thing to hear stories at Passover, and it's completely another thing to actually see the places she talks about.
To be able to experience that with Grandma and with Mom and myself being the third generation, I think is going to be just a really powerful experience. So I'm just coming in with open arms. Small expectations is exactly what I'm going to find, because I don't really know, but I know it's going to be a part of me that, you know, I've always wanted to find.
I think the trip will definitely change all of us. I think we'll be more in tune to our past and more in tune to each other, and getting to see a part of the world that most of us would never be able to see otherwise. So really grateful.
So tomorrow is the day we're going to be focusing especially on our Jewish heritage here in Vienna. We're going to start the morning with a special tour for our group of what's called the Stad Temple, which is City Temple. That's the main synagogue in Vienna. And what will be startling to people when they walk to the synagogue is that it looks just like an apartment building from the outside. You have no idea it's actually a Jewish house of prayer until you get through the doors. It's an amazingly moving place when you realize how much the Jews had to camouflage their worship in Vienna. We'll have a wonderful tour. We won't be able to see the archives because they're under renovation, and so we won't see the books that I saw myself the last time we were here that have my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents' history, but we'll know that it was housed in that building.
We have 200,000 Jews in Vienna between 1910 and 1930. It's enormously big, enormously. Many of them are leading in all fields. 50% of doctor of medicine until 1938 are Jewish doctors. 60% of the lawyers are Jewish lawyers. This group of Jews grows enormously big. 200,000 Jews, they are leading, they are very successful, very contributing, very well integrated. The more they become successful and contributing, there is more anti-Semitism hand in hand parallel in Vienna. Let's look what happens 1938. Out of 200,000 Jews, the number of Jews go down to 170. A year later, is 1939, we had 120,000 Jews who leave this country at the right time, and the majority had saved itself. We had 65,000 Austrian Jews working in various concentration camps. Until 1980, education system, Holocaust was not even existing. No child was learning about Holocaust. Not even the existence of our Holocaust. This is the point. If there is no Holocaust here, and history books are finished by 1938 and begins again by 1945, you have to understand for these people there is no restitution either, because there is no Holocaust. So we come to today, and we have 11,000 Jews in all of Austria. Many Americans come to us, many of them. And then, of course, they come with feelings, the grandpapa, grandmama, and whatever, and they say, it's so beautiful, but, and this but stands, very big. And I always say, you are right, whatever you say as far as Holocaust is concerned, but you have to look at it today too, because we live today. You can look at the past and learn out of it. Only if you learn out of your past, you can conduct in the right way and for the future.
It was very moving to hear the story of, first of all, the history of the Jews in that part of Europe, and then to realize what had happened during the Anschluss and afterwards, the loss of community.
From the Stad Temple, we will walk to a special exhibition inside the old City Hall of Vienna, which is a retrospective about the resistance during the 1930s and 40s, and about owning really the role that the local Viennese played in the persecution of Jews and gypsies and homosexuals. From there, we will go to the central square called the Judenplatz, where the old temple back in 1420 was last standing, and it was destroyed, and all that's left are the ruins of the foundation, which are deep below the ground. On top of the ruins was created a central memorial for the Holocaust. This nameless library depicts books with their spines facing inward, representing the untold stories of Holocaust victims.
It was sad because it was a reminder that we had been forgotten and that so many stories remained covered and untold, and that with what is going on in the world today, that we really needed to open the pages and start telling the stories.
So after we go to the Judenplatz, we will then make our way across the city to where Grandma Eva was born and the apartment where Catherine and Frederick Spiegler made their life and brought their daughter Hannah Eva into this world in 1937. In December of 1938, they left everything behind in the apartment building, and Catherine and her 2-year-old daughter Eva went to the train station and left beautiful Vienna forever. For me, this beautiful apartment that we will stand outside of represents the horror of being exiled from your home, from the place that you hold dearest, the place that is your place of birth. It also represents to me the fear of the unknown, the idea that a woman and her 2-year-old baby left this beautiful place to go across the world to a place where they didn't speak the language and they didn't know what they would face at the other end, nor did they know whether they would ever see their father, their husband again. And so you'll see when we go inside that it's surrounded on all sides by apartment buildings. So they are all looking at this cemetery. It's very odd.
Isn't that crazy? I feel like a retirement home.
Yeah, I know.
To be staring at a cemetery.
Yeah, exactly. What we've got here is a senior center. So we're going to go in the front doors, throughout the back side of the senior center. And there's the oldest cemetery in Vienna, the Jewish cemetery. The graves date back from 1611. And then it's gotten destroyed throughout the years, but remember we heard about Franz Joseph? He basically made a pact with the Jews that this cemetery would in perpetuity be protected. But then along came 1938. The Nazis came and said, we're gonna destroy all the cemeteries. So the Jews went and they took as many headstones as they could from the cemetery, but they couldn't get them all, and you'll see there's a bunch that are knocked over and destroyed. And so the Nazis came and flattened what was left. Then after, in the 40s and 50s, there was an effort to restore the cemetery. And then recently, in the 80s or 90s, the Austrian government again reinstituted the same pact that Franz Joseph, saying that this will be protected in perpetuity.
Okay, so the first thing we did today was wake up at 5:30 in the morning.
As you can tell, pretty long day. And we took the train into Bratislava,
where we met our guide Blanca, and then took a bus to Szasztyn, the town where Grandpa Spiegler was born.
And his sisters were all born there. And I don't know if it'll give us a feeling of long ago or not, but I'm hoping it will give us some feeling of what it was like. Part of our tour was to have been to go to the archives in Slovakia and Bratislava. However, for some reason the government has decided today's a holiday and they've shut down everything, so that is not going to happen.
We can try to see the village, probably to ask somebody or something like that.
Maybe if they remember?
The name and things like that. We can try something to discover something more about the history of your family.
Good.
We went into the building in the opposite of the church, what is the town hall, and we had to wait at first a little bit, and then we went to the first lady, but she doesn't have any records. Then she sent us to another lady taking care about the cemeteries, and she told us here is one Jewish cemetery, but she didn't know exactly where. So she sent us to the third lady, and she was very nice, and she called one gentleman and she checked if the cemetery is opened. It's opened. And she will call another gentleman, and if he has time, he's one retired man, he will be on the cemetery. If not, he will not be there. And she told us that the synagogue, probably the building now coming on the right.
Our tour guide didn't even know that there was a synagogue in this tiny little, as she said, 2,000-person town. And we found this synagogue that was, in disrepair, but we peeked inside the windows and it was just beautiful. I mean, the ceiling was blue and gold and it was gorgeous.
Jewish stars everywhere. I mean, it was falling apart though. but we kind of created a stir in the local gypsy population and came out. After that, we met up with a local historian, some hobbyists.
Retired historian.
Yeah, he was like a hobbyist, and he took us to a Jewish cemetery.
Yeah, so we met him, and I mean, it was just a crazy experience because it just came out of nowhere. You know, they're like, oh, we're meeting this guy, and he's going to bring us into the cemetery.
This is Mr. Štefan Ovečka. To je tá pani, čo...
Sa hlásili o podcením tej totožnosti Špigler Friedrich.
Friedrich Špigler.
That's my father.
14, narodený
Jej otec.
14.4.1894.
April 14.
April 14, 1864.
To je jej otec.
To je z tej mestskej zápisnice.
And this is from the town hall papers.
Potom bol Špigler Hedvika.
Špigler Hedviga.
16.6. narodená.
April 16, 1899. To boli súrodenci všetko.
A potom Špigler Katica.
Špigler Katica.
Yeah. Export liečivých rastlín.
Oh, Špigler family was the company for herbs. They dried and exported herbs.
Really?
Yeah, when he read out Frederick Spiegler and said April 14th, it was just like, whoa, this is not, like, this is happening right now. Like, we've kind of found it.
It was just legit. It was so moving that we were all there for that moment when we were like, he read out the birthday.
He said was just like, wow. It was another insight. You know, yesterday we saw where Grandma was born and everything like that, but today was another insight into something, another part of his life and his.
Just kind of connecting the
dots. Yeah, kind of the whole point of the trip.
Is there anything that you would want to say to young people who will be watching this tape about you?
I would say, if they have a chance, if there is somewhere a film to show about that Holocaust and about all those concentration camps, if there are meetings, if there is somebody who is talking about, they should not miss it to attend to it. It is not very pleasant to listen to it, but I believe it is necessary that I should know about it.
It was a very moving and difficult reality check, I think, for us all, especially myself, being raised in the U.S. as a Jew and really not having come across many experiences of anti-Semitism throughout my life. I was not aware that that was not the case until we started out on this journey.
My belief is that anti-Semitism remains and is a constant threat. I think there are good people who will try to oppose it, but somehow the attitudes that she described and what happened in Austria and in the rest of Europe for that matter, and maybe happening today in Europe, is something of a lesson that we need to carry with us. Whether we like it or not, history is telling us that we're all Jews. Whether we're half Jewish or quarter Jewish, 1/16 Jewish, for the National Socialist movement, for Hitler, it made no difference. And yet there's something wonderful about survival and the fact that we still exist as a culture, as a religion, as a nation. It's quite wonderful.
It's important. It's about our family. It's about their legacy and some people who weren't particularly fond of Jewish people failing desire to get rid of us.
My connection to Judaism is the strength and the plight of the people that have suffered, have understood, you know, what it means to have nothing, to be persecuted, and to keep going and to find a way out of the darkness, always, no matter what. I think that's what it means to be Jewish, and I think I feel lucky to have that.
Being Jewish to me means appreciating how far we've come, just in the world in general, and how we've overcome a lot of anti-Semitism and things like that, just being proud of who you are. I think that is what it comes down to at the end of the day.
It was a coming together of the cousins and the family that created an atmosphere that I hope will continue as the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, hopefully, carry on the tradition that really Eva has set for the family.
I think they learned first from a personal point of view, the meaning of the Holocaust, the meaning of the destruction of Jewry in Europe. When we first heard Molly in Vienna talking about the fact that Vienna was built practically by Jews, and they're all gone. And yes, in Hungary we saw those magnificent synagogues, but there's no Jews left to go in them, to participate in the services. So I think that was something that history is something way in the distance that was brought home to them.
There was an identity, a recognition that we are one family, and that the future depends on you and the other young people in the family. I was moved by how they felt, how all of you felt about the experiences that you saw and went through. In some way that validated the whole reason for having the trip, which was, after all, a Roots tour for Eva, because it meant that the children and grandchildren understood the Roots and the impact of them and could carry on.